my question to the group in the room was, the longer I have worked or been working in EdTech for, the less I see its value. And I left it at that because I wanted people in the room to kind of actually have a think about that question. The response that came around, actually the value of EdTech is in its fragmentation. Okay, so I'm Carla Aerts. I'm the director of the Tmrw Institute. The Tmrw Institute is a kind of relatively new organisation, part of an umbrella organisation called Tmrw Digital. And my role is kind of being the front face and the outreach and the kind of influencer thought leadership of Tmrw Digital through engagement with wider communities around technologies and learning and EdTech and efficacy and the role of EdTech in education systems, but also beyond. So it's about learning with technologies and EdTech. And what we do is we do a variety of things, but one of them is convening, because we feel very, very strongly, and it's also historically connected to our organization, which is part of the Varkey Families group of companies. And they also, of course, run the Varkey Foundation and the Global Teacher Prize, is actually we want to bring kind of different stakeholders to the conversation and to sort of try and be a catalyst to unlock some of the, roadblocks we've got in EdTech now, and the adoption of it and the efficiency, efficacy, effectiveness, all these kind of good questions, to also sort of look at EdTech for good and the impact that EdTech can have in many different contexts. What excites me most is actually how EdTech, and that's for me one of the most exciting things about it and why I still do it, is how it actually helps with access to learning and how it makes that more possible. On tiny little devices, not necessarily the best learning experiences, but actually giving access to learning and access that many people didn't have before. And that is one of its most exciting aspects. And that, is in part of the world. Other parts of the world are forging ahead. But, if you look at it globally in terms of, how it's really being adopted, I think it's fragmented, but not as kind of ubiquitous as people would like it to be. So the role for universities in EdTech and how they need to sort of be part or become part of that ecosystem, I think is absolutely gigantic. What I would hate to see happen is that suddenly EdTech organizations have to become like deep academic research organizations, because they can't flourish that way. But what I would like to see is actually that cross-fertilization and that dialogue, that like what we're trying to do in the Institute, obviously the kind of university is inherent in that. What I think is a huge problem, and actually we had an event last night with the Tmrw Institute that talked about no impact, no EdTech, and actually was addressing some of these issues, there was a loud cry from the audience that said, we want to work with universities, universities don't want to work with us. We can't reach academics, academics don't want to know about us, don't believe in us, don't believe in EdTech, all these kind of things. Why is it that we can't get academics to kind of come to us and say, hey guys, we want to do a piece of research with you because you've got the conduit for us to do this. It's not happening. Why is this the case? So there's loads of flavors and dimensions that this kind of ecosystem needs to start gelling and go in a kind of cross-fertilized dialogue. But also I think for universities a big challenge, and for academics, is that they tend to work in relatively slow research mode, whereas these kind of businesses tend to work in an accelerated mode. And for me, what's really exciting about this for a university is actually, does this lead to a new way of tackling research and research models that are not necessarily accepted now, but actually we may need to embrace and may need to accept to kind of live in the world of the 21st century and the future. And I think universities need to kind of reflect on that and possibly reinvent themselves a little bit, if not a big bit. But that's I think where the magic could happen. Okay, so I was very keen to post a bit of a bombshell challenge. And my question to the group in the room was, the longer I have worked or been working in EdTech for, the less I see its value. And I left it at that because I wanted people in the room to kind of actually have a think about that question and come up with some challenges for me and responses to my question, trying to prove me wrong or corroborating or whatever. But that was the challenge we worked on, and we gave people the time to kind of reflect on this, reflect in a very collaborative format, and sort of really kind of delve into the discussion. What I found wonderful was kind of the diversity of the kind of concept of value that actually came out, and the role that EdTech is kind of playing in that value, and how we need to see that value, or what the aspects of value could be. And the most refreshing thing for me was actually the response that came around actually the value of EdTech is in its fragmentation. And that was the best thing I've heard today. So it's very, very good to see how people sort of address this question and where that potentially can take us on a route going forward. It's probably meant to be in the plural because there's no single status. The status is kind of so diverse, connected to the fragmentation, connected to access, connected to infrastructure, connected to so many different things, and not to forget obviously context and culture. Which are usually the things that people sort of talk about at the back of the queue. I would say fragmentation definitely rife, although of course you've got the kind of the big bulldozers in kind of big markets, especially China and India, who are forging ahead, and you know that's where you're also seeing the unicorns and a couple in the States, where these kind of approaches of fragmentations are actually not recognised. And also, some of those most successful companies are working outside of the system of education. So they're, especially in China, and actually the one in India, you know, Baiju, is all based on private tutoring, for which there's a huge demand in those markets. So I wouldn't want that to sort of be the beacon that we kind of orientate ourselves to, because I think that would be a very, very wrong thing for EdTech to do. I think we should look at the diversity, the fragmentation, because also if we just look at those beacons, we will never innovate. We will never break the mold in small steps, but you know, we will never kind of solve that problem.